Hello again, Earth, humanity. I'd like to start by saying that I love you and I'm here to serve you. I'm going to share my take on freedom on Earth, Earth's Constitution, our republic of planet Earth, in which we all humans are the citizenry, our republic. I'll share my constitution with you, what I wrote, my thoughts, my writings, my draft of Earth's constitution, which is for all of us to enjoy, because it's our planet, it's our home. I'll share it with you. And this is forever, for everyone out there to read and understand who we are and our rights, our freedoms. So I'll start now. Hello world, 21st century. Human liberation on Earth. The infinite millennia of infinite freedoms began on Earth on the 26th of May, 2023. Preambles enshrined in Earth's Constitution. Our nation is constituted by the free will of our citizens. Our nation and all of our citizens are free, sovereign, and independent. All of our nation's powers and authorities rest in us, its citizens. Each citizen of our nation is self-sovereign. We stand free, united, and equal as one nation on Earth and outside Earth's orbit. We live in a free, sovereign, and independent republic. We, the citizens, are the powers and authorities of our republic on Earth and outside Earth's orbit, forever, infinitely. The citizens of the republic declare Earth and outside Earth's orbit neutrality towards all states and peoples. All powers and authorities rest in the hands of all our citizens at once, simultaneously, forever, infinitely. The citizens of the Republic are at once, simultaneously, heads of state and commanders-in-chief, forever, infinitely. The citizens of the Republic own the state and the government of the Republic, forever, infinitely. The citizens of our Republic come together to form a democratically elected government that exercises administrative functions of the state, representing our nation's domestic and foreign affairs and interests. The purpose of our elected government and its officials is to safeguard, uphold, protect, defend, strengthen, and promote the freedoms, liberties, and rights of the citizens of our nation, permanent residents, and certain eligible visa holders. No state, government, individual, groups, institution, and/or entity, foreign or domestic, have any rights, powers, and/or authorities over any of our citizens, nation, state, and/or government. Our freedoms, liberties, and rights, not an exclusive list. Free will. True self-freedoms. Our freedoms to forge our own paths, make our own decisions, take action, choose our own identities, purposes, destinations in all matters of existence, forever, infinitely. Infinite freedoms. Our freedoms are infinite, limitless, and without boundaries. We understand that new forms of freedom emerge. We claim them all. freedoms forever, infinitely. Energy freedoms. Our citizens have infinite energy, sovereignty, and independence. 0 point and over unity systems, propulsion, gravity mastery, and all new technologies belong to the citizenry, including patents, the like, and all freedoms to current and future discoveries. Time freedoms. Identity freedoms. Purpose freedoms. Action freedoms. True freedoms. Speech freedoms. Our minds and words are spoken freely, forever, infinitely. Press freedoms. Our mediums, media, and the like are free, forever, infinitely. Expression freedoms. Our lives and actions are expressed freely, forever, infinitely. Movement freedoms. Our destinations are ours, forever, infinitely. Assembly freedoms. Our union is eternal, forever, infinitely. Worship freedoms. Our beliefs, values, principles, faith, etc., and so on are sacred, forever, infinitely. Political freedoms. We're free to stand for office and elect others to office. Infinite veto freedoms, petitions, etc., forever, infinitely. Economic freedoms. We're prosperous, abundant, and free from debt, forever, infinitely. Defense and self-defense freedoms. We defend ourselves from those wishing us harm, forever, infinitely. Legal freedoms. We honor due process of law, forever, infinitely. Human freedoms. Education freedoms. Housing and accommodation freedoms. Technological freedoms. Full health freedoms. Cultural freedoms. Environmental and natural resources freedoms. Trade freedoms. Institutional freedoms. Heritage and legacy freedoms. Intellectual property freedoms. Quality assurance freedoms. Food freedoms. Medical freedoms. Full body freedoms. Physical, non-physical property freedoms. Transparency and privacy freedoms. The issue of currency freedoms. Our citizenry can issue currency to cover all standard costs of living required to warrant and guarantee all our freedoms with the proviso that they act within reason, apply common sense, and adhere to non-inflationary best practices to warrant financial freedoms forever, infinitely. Financial freedoms. Land and territorial freedoms. Our citizenry owns all the lands, territories, and uncharted, unclaimed discoveries of, by, for the Republic, that is to say, freehold, forever, infinitely. Private property freedoms. Electoral freedoms. Veto powers freedoms. Voting freedoms. Standing for office freedoms. Destination freedoms. Action freedoms. Flow freedoms. True north freedoms. Compass freedoms. Fantasies and illusions freedoms. Why how freedoms. Here and now freedoms. Pillars. Elections. All political parties are obsolete. Local and central elections take place as usual. Candidates for all elected offices are citizenry constituency candidates, standing on their own self-sovereignty, representing their own chosen citizenry constituency. Constituencies are based on population size of each electorate. No party votes, just direct votes for each individual standing for office. Each eligible citizen will cast their vote based on their electorate constituency or type of vote applicable to legislative, executive, judicial branch elections. Each vote, regardless of the election type, is a direct vote by each constituent. All votes are worth the same. One citizen equals one vote. One vote per person for each election. Votes are secret, universal, and equal. Coercion is illegal and punishable by law. Governments won't be formed based on coalitions, cartels, factions, united fronts, etc. Government consists of all elected officials regardless of their policy views. There is no such thing as majority or minority governments, including any of their expressions. Government is not a dichotomy of opposition versus governing party. Elected legislative officials work together until consensus is reached by a supermajority vote of 90%, not based on quorum, but based on all elected officials. Elected officials must cast their vote themselves and be present during plenary sessions, no proxy vote allowed, etc. All elected officials take place in the management of the state, given the authorities and powers of each office accordingly. Elected, legislative, executive, judicial branch officials distribute the power of the office proportionally among all elected candidates for each constituency based on their representative position, authorities, and powers. Executive officials are randomly chosen for cabinet roles from the pool of elected legislative officials and are rotated annually. Having said this, all elected legislative officials are trained in cabinet roles by the respective executive office to ensure excellent standards. Once an elected legislative official has been chosen for cabinet roles, the same candidate cannot hold cabinet positions again for current or any future terms. Armed Forces Stakeholders Clause. No citizen under such status can stand for elected office unless they have been retired, released from military service, and gained a veteran status for at least 10 consecutive years. This includes reservists, volunteers, conflict of interests, etc. There is only 5 departments within the executive branch: Department of State or Foreign Office, Department of Justice, Treasury, Department of Defense and Self-Defense, and Heritage and Legacy Office. Thus, there are 5 secretaries forming the executive branch cabinet. All other existing departments are obsolete. All the remaining agencies and authorities required for the administration of the state are downsized by 80% and attached respectively to the 5 executive departments. For example, tax authorities sit under Treasury. Department of Domestic Affairs, powers, authorities, and functions are distributed across 5 departments based on each specific need and requirement. The obsolescence process apply accordingly to all departments, authorities, and agencies. In case of the need of any entity, department, agency, and/or authority, given their legacy and relevance in the current system, for example, health, education, etc., the citizens declare that the Obsolescence and Transition Oversight Committee is formed by the legislative branch, consisting of 20% of the elected citizenry candidates of constituencies, randomly chosen, equal in status, to ensure a smooth transition to our constitutional order and restore the powers, functions, authorities of these obsolete departments, agencies, and entities Back to the citizenry. Transition into obsolescence directive applicable to any entity, department, agency, and/or authority are completed within 24 months of the founding of the Republic. Judicial branch officials are elected by constituency. For example, the citizenry. In case of ties for any elected official position, subsequent rounds place until tie is broken and a clear winner is declared. Referendums of any matter of law, including legislative, executive, judicial, are called upon by the citizenry directly when 10% of the citizenry constituency petitions accordingly. Then a yes-no direct vote election date is chosen within 90 days. Removal of elected officials is called upon by citizenry directly when 10% of the constituency petitions accordingly. Then a yes-no direct vote election date is chosen within 90 days. Removed officials lose immunity and undergo due process in a public court case regarding allegations of crimes, abuse of power, etc. An elected official can only be subject to removal from office once per election cycle. More pending. Taxation. As of the 17th of October 2023, individual income tax from $0 to $30,000. Individuals pay zero tax. From $30,001 to $100,000, individuals pay 10% of their income. From $100,001 to $200,000, individuals pay 12.5%. $200,000 plus, individuals pay 15% of their income. GST, 5%. Applicable tax-free exceptions for certain goods and services based on legislative branch supermajority votes, 90%. Subject to sunset clauses for up to 48 months. Then, after a special period, it goes back to 5%, meaning GST is 5% across the board. Corporations, other entities, including listed, unlisted, etc., 15% tax on profits. Not-for-profits, foundations, social enterprises, religious institutions, etc., lose all their tax exemptions privileges. They are taxed the same as individuals. All other taxes are abolished, including capital gains, inheritance, duty stamps, customs, etc. No exceptions. Allocation of taxes. Each tax number holder has the freedoms and obligations to allocate their taxed income accordingly, thus distributing across their chosen government spending investment buckets. As per budgetary best practices, there are minimum quotas required for specific buckets as well as ceilings. Tax number holders have access to an app where they allocate when, where, how, what, and why their taxes are allocated for expenditure. For example, an individual could allocate 50% of their taxes to be spent, invested in education, including comprehensive breakdowns for each category. For example, of that 50%, 20% goes to primary schools in their electorate area, 10% goes to funding a university of their choice, and 30% goes to high schools. Tax number holders allocate specific amounts for buckets of their choice. For example, $50 for new biology books, etc., and so on. These freedoms and obligations are bound by law for each tax number holder. Once minimum quotas and ceilings are reached, individuals have to allocate their remaining funds to other areas of their own choosing and interests. The tax authorities, including the Treasury, have no say, power, and/or authority on who, what, when, why, where, and how Funds are allocated by contributors. Quotas and ceilings are chosen by elected representatives in accordance with budgetary rules and Treasury guidance. More pending. Budgetary rules. Government cannot propose, accept, and run budgetary deficits by law unless the legislative body approves with 90% vote under justifiable cause, i.e., national emergencies, national security, etc. This special period cannot last longer than 36 months over a period of 10 years with a maximum of 2 fiscal year deficits in a row. During special periods, annual fiscal deficits cannot exceed 2.5% of taxation revenue for each fiscal year. Government presents annual budget based on allocations of each contributor. Buckets and ceilings are guided and established based on allocated contributions by Annual Budget Oversight Committee, formed by legislative branch consisting of 20% of electorate citizenry constituency candidates or of constituencies, randomly chosen, equal in status, to ensure appropriate allocation, distribution, administration, and management of funds. The Treasury assists the Budget Oversight Committee in the process. A preliminary annual budget is presented to the legislative branch at least 60 days prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year. Budget must be presented by government and approved by legislature 30 days prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year. Budget approval requires a majority vote of 90% to be approved. Subsequent rounds of voting are completed in case of insufficient votes. The voting process takes place within the 30-day window starting 60 days prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year until the 30-day deadline prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year is reached. Government must hit an annual fiscal surplus above 5%, of which a third must be directed toward paying down sovereign government debt, if any whatsoever. A third deposited into the National Sovereign Wealth Fund, and a third reinvested in key future-proofing public projects, plans, etc. Government debt cannot exceed 20% of the total annual GDP. Government must fund its debts, if any whatsoever, with bonds financed by its citizenry, in case government cannot raise enough capital through bonds. Debt Transparency Oversight Committee, formed by the legislative branch consisting of 20% of elected citizenry constituency candidates of constituencies, randomly equal in status, may grant an authorization for the Treasury to raise capitals in the global markets. This is a transparent process, and all debt acquired by the government in accordance with financial authorities within our own sovereign legal framework. The public and citizenry knows of all information pertaining potential lenders and all terms being discussed in advance at least 90 days prior to any letter of understanding being signed. Veto powers freedoms by the citizenry apply. Cases of usury, corruption, unreasonable terms, etc. are prosecuted. Thus, sovereign debt is an exclusive freedom of the citizenry. Thus, granting a license to the Treasury in trust to be used in extraordinary circumstances only. Signing of any terms requires 90% approval vote by the legislative body after public citizenry consultation review hearings and veto stage are completed. The government, Treasury, can issue bonds at local and central levels without exceeding its 20% GDP ratio ceiling. The Treasury has a license to issue currency, granted by the citizenry. This license cannot be repurposed, released, relicensed, and or forfeited to any third parties, whether private, public, foreign, and or domestic, under any circumstances whatsoever. The freedoms to issue currency are of the citizenry, and the Treasury exercises this license in trust only. Central banks are obsolete. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. The role of Treasury is that of financial stability, with a legal obligation to keep inflation at 0%. The annual target for annual deflation is between 0.5% and 5%, meaning the Republic's currency purchasing power increases every day, every year, accordingly, forever, infinitely. The Treasury must manage a national sovereign wealth fund within our own financial system. The National Sovereign Wealth Fund must be fiscally conservative and highly diversified. At least 5 to 10% of the National Sovereign Wealth Fund must be held in precious metals and or alternative assets such as gemstones, fine art, and the like, with no less than 5% held in gold, all stored in the national vaults. The Treasury must contribute between 5% and 10% of its total taxation revenue, excluding any surpluses, toward the National Sovereign Wealth Fund every fiscal year. The Treasury must contribute between 2% and 5% of its total taxation revenue, excluding any surpluses, toward paying down sovereign government debt, if any whatsoever, every fiscal year. After all quotas and ceilings are met as per annual budget, any floating funds, i.e. unallocated funds, are deposited into the National Sovereign Wealth Fund within 30 days of the beginning of the new fiscal period. National Sovereign Wealth Fund monies and/or assets cannot be withdrawn, liquidated, spent, or repurposed by any means unless the legislative body approves it with a 90% vote, and up to 10% of the National Sovereignty Wealth Fund can be withdrawn within a period of 60 months, with no more than 5% exercised within any given fiscal year. For the Treasury to solicit a withdrawal approval, a minimum threshold must be met under justifiable cause, i.e. national emergencies, national security, etc. All government expenditure is highly scrutinized and stored in a national distributed ledger where all tax number holders and contributors can access within their app. Full transparency and accountability is in place. User hashes and timestamps for each transaction are publicly available to contributors. Only national security transactions are kept secret due to obvious reasons. However, the total amount and breakdowns percentages will be disclosed to the best of the Treasury's ability without compromising national security, without revealing methods, sources, and state secrets, etc. Having said these, transparency and full disclosure freedoms apply. Veto powers apply. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. More pending. Banking. All interest rates, deposits, mortgages, fractional banking, funds, protection, guarantees, etc. The only institution with a license to issue currency on behalf of the citizenry is the Treasury. Banks, private or public, foreign or domestic, have no license to issue currency in any way, shape, or form within our Republic's land and territorial jurisdictions and constitutional framework. All bank funds required to function must be lent and borrowed from the citizens, and in some cases subject to citizenry approval by the Treasury. The citizenry is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. The issue of currency freedoms, liberties, and rights are of our citizenry of the Republic. The state and our democratically elected government have no freedoms, rights, and/or liberties regarding the issue of currency freedoms. The citizenry possess full freedoms, liberties, rights, powers, authorities, etc. and so on, and the like regarding the issue of currency freedoms. All funds lent and borrowed and interest and fees paid are executed through citizenry bonds. The citizenry are the creditors and beneficiaries of all terms forever, infinitely. More pending. Land. All land and territories are owned by the citizenry. Global and outside Earth's orbit trade. Trade freedom supply. Department of Defense and Self-Defense. Preamble. Above anything else, the purpose of the Department of Defense and Self-Defense is to serve, safeguard, protect, uphold, and defend our infinite freedoms, our citizenry, our republic, and our constitutional framework on Earth and outside Earth's orbit forever, infinitely. Our citizenry and republic have infinite freedoms to defend against harm forever, infinitely. Our citizens are all our heads of state and commanders-in-chief at once, simultaneously, forever, infinitely. We do not live in a state of war and or declare war to any states, species, peoples, sentient beings, etc. and so on, regardless of their biological and or both synthetic nature and or their dimensional existence, including their level of intelligence and self-awareness status. The Department of Defense, self-defense, is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedom supply. Local and central government and governance. The local and central government are the same. Thus, government implies local, central, executive, legislative, judicial, governmental levels. The Treasury funds all government lending terms on behalf of the owners, creditors, and beneficiaries, the citizenry of the Republic. The government funds lending terms by buying purposeful citizenry constituency bonds for up to 25-year terms issued by the citizenry constituency at 0 to 5% interest rate. Local government pays income tax on all funding. The government, that is to say local, central, executive, legislative, judicial, pay income tax on all funding. The government is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Defense and self-defense freedoms applied. Local government role reduced by 80%, that is to say all councils and the like. No rates, levies, fees, etc. and so on, forever, infinitely. The Treasury funds the government with lending terms based on tax contributions and allocations. The government funds lending terms by buying purposeful citizenry constituency bonds for up to 25-year terms issued by citizenry constituency at 0 to 5% interest rates. The government pays income tax on all funding. Council services which don't contribute net positive outcomes for citizenry are phased out within 180 days. Local and central elections. Citizenry candidates, campaigns, electorates, and constituency. The government can fund campaigns. Each citizenry candidate must fund campaigns with donations from citizenry constituencies. No self-funding. Donation limit per person of $10,000. No entity, vehicle, etc. and so on and the like can make donations, punishable by law. Only humans accountable within our republic, that is to say citizens, permanent residents, and certain eligible visa holders can donate. There is no limit as to the number of citizenry candidates that can register to run for a constituency. Citizenry candidates are citizens, no exceptions. Electoral Transparency and Oversight Committee is formed from 20% of elected citizenry constituency candidates and constituencies elected legislative officials, randomly chosen, equal in status, to warrant free elections based on transparency, end-to-end ballot counting visibility, accountability, etc., and so on. The citizenry and the public is free to form watches and have custody of the votes until the end of each election cycle. The citizenry have freedoms to veto the Electoral Transparency and Oversight Committee to warrant electoral freedoms. Elections, dates, term lengths, and periods remain the same. The free press, whether public or private, foreign or domestic, must adhere to electoral freedoms. The citizenry of the Republic have electoral freedoms warranting impartiality, unbiased mediums and media, thus equally distributing the voices of all citizenry constituency candidates across all their distribution networks and channels without exception. During local, central, judicial electoral cycles, the free press must warrant and guarantee equal distributed space cover throughout the whole end-to-end electoral cycle to all citizenry constituency candidates. The citizenry constituency candidates form any number of debates, conversations, events, etc., and so on and the like across constituencies. The free press, mediums, and media must be present and cover all debates. A citizenry constituency candidate cannot run for multiple constituencies simultaneously. The number of seats at the House of Government must be equally distributed, not proportional, in terms of electoral populations, also accounting for population growth. For example, the electoral constituency ratio to representation needs to be within a per capita band range, warranting and guaranteeing equal representation across all citizens' constituencies in the Republic. Citizenry constituency representation ratios for each citizenry constituency candidacy. Central seat, legislative branch, 1 citizenry constituency candidate for every 20,000 citizenry constituents. Judicial, police, judicial branch, seat, 2 citizenry constituency candidate for 10,000 citizenry constituents. Local seat, local government equals 1 citizenry constituency candidate for every 5,000 citizenry constituents. Buildings of government are owned by the citizenry of the Republic. National security and secrecy, transparency and privacy freedoms apply. The citizenry are the citizens of the Republic. Citizens have freedoms to lend and borrow funds to other permanent residents and certain eligible visa holders. Citizens are, as per financial freedoms and issue of currency freedoms, de facto banks. No usury terms allowed, punishable by law. The state and the government have no freedoms, liberties, and/or rights. The citizenry of our republic have all freedoms, liberties, and rights. The state and the government are owned by the citizenry of the republic. Department of Justice, judicial branch, and the legal system. Preamble. The Department of Justice is owned by the citizenry of the republic. Above anything else, the purpose of the Department of Justice is to warrant and guarantee legal freedoms and all pertaining freedoms forever, infinitely. Veto freedoms apply. Freedoms and contract law. Freedoms cannot be negotiated away. Any way, shape, or form of agreement and/or contract under any jurisdiction on Earth and outside Earth's orbit implying such anti-freedom deeds, directly, indirectly, covertly, overtly, aware, unaware, conscious, unconscious, etc., and so on, are hereby declared null and void by the citizenry of the Republic forever, infinitely. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. The Department of Defense and Department of State are owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedoms apply. Rights of corporations, trusts, institutions, NGOs, foundations, social enterprises, sole traders, intergovernmental and international treaties and agreements, entities, etc., no exceptions. They have no freedoms, liberties, and/or rights. The citizenry of the Republic have all freedoms, liberties, and rights. Individual benefits, stipends, pensions, superannuations, etc., and so on are hereby declared obsolete. Financial freedoms and issue of currency freedoms apply. Department of State. Preamble. Above anything else, the purpose of the Department of State is to warrant and guarantee the freedoms, liberties, and rights of the citizenry of the Republic abroad and outside Earth's orbit forever, infinitely. Any currently binding treaties and/or agreements hindering, prohibiting, and/or stopping, depriving our citizenry and/or Republic from exercising full freedoms, liberties, and rights abroad and outside Earth's orbit are withdrawn to be renegotiated here and now by the citizenry to warrant and guarantee all our infinite freedoms and constitutional framework. All states and entities, including the UN, Red Cross, intergovernmental and international treaties and agreements, etc., and so on, and the like, are included, no exceptions. The Department of State acts as the official representative of the Republic on behalf of our citizenry regarding other nations, people, states, etc., and so on, and the like. The Department of State is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedom supply. Treasury. Preamble. Above anything else, the purpose of the Treasury is to warrant and guarantee the issue of currency freedoms and financial freedoms of, by, for our citizenry and the Republic forever, infinitely. The Treasury is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedom supply. Heritage and Legacy Office. Preamble. The Heritage and Legacy Office is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedom supply. Heritage and Legacy Preamble on all current governance systems in place. Space exploration, interstellar travel, intergalactic directive, and new technologies. Our Republic withdraws from all binding treaties prohibiting our citizenry, nation, and Republic from enforcing our freedoms, rights, and liberties outside Earth's orbit. All states and entities, including the UN, Red Cross, intergovernmental, international treaties and agreements, etc., and so on, and the like, are all included, no exceptions, forever, infinitely. Our Republic declares neutrality towards all extraterrestrial states, species, peoples, sentient beings, etc., and so on, regardless of their biological and or both synthetic nature, and of their dimensional existence, including their level of intelligence and self-awareness status. All discoveries and uncharted and unclaimed systems, sectors, quadrants, planets, and territories, etc., are automatically part of our Republic, and our citizenry freedoms, rights, and liberties are binding forever, infinitely. Uncharted and unclaimed implies that such systems, sectors, quadrants, planets, and territories, etc., don't currently possess any way, shape, or form of extraterrestrial states, peoples, sentient beings, species, etc., and so on, regardless of their biological and or both synthetic and of their dimensional existence, including their level of intelligence and self-awareness status. Executive Office. Preamble. Executive Office refers to the 5 departments of the executive branch, i.e., Department of Defense, Self-Defense, Department of Justice, Department of State, Treasury, and Heritage and Legacy Office. The Cabinet rotates every year, once a year. 5 elected officials are randomly chosen from the legislative branch to become members of the Executive Cabinet, and the Executive Office trains them so the Executive Branch exercises excellent standard of care, deliver results, and represent the Republic on behalf of the citizenry. The Executive Office is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Veto freedoms apply. Citizenry lands and territorial freeholds. Non-citizens' 25-year leasehold declaration includes governments, states, sole traders, individuals, listed, unlisted companies, foreign and domestic, trusts, see-throughs, entities, foundations, religious institutions, social enterprises, charities, etc., and so on and the like, forever, infinitely. Non-citizens can't own land and or territories, including infrastructure, facilities, premises, buildings, grades, etc., and so on and the like. They only have leasehold rights for up to 25 years. FDI, that is to say, Foreign Direct Investment Transparency Oversight Committee, consisting of 20% of elected citizenry constituency candidates of constituencies, randomly chosen, equal in status and citizenry veto powers in place. Non-citizens can't own shares of any legal construct and or entity, no exceptions. They can't hold executive, non-executive office of such deeds, nor exercise any rights on their behalf, including signing rights and all other rights, forever, infinitely. Proxies are punishable by law. Judicial branch. Equal number of elected judges and superintendents. Juries pass down sentences and verdicts, not judges. Judges simply oversee and lead procedures and cases. Juries consists of citizenry constituents between 10 and 40 members randomly chosen from the constituency and equal in status. The numbers of jurors chosen for a case are based on the court level. Lowest court level equals 10 jurors. Highest court level case equals 40 jurors. Juries pass down sentences and verdicts based on a majority consensus of at least 70%. Deliberations and open debate where all jurors participate must continue on until the minimum threshold of 70% is reached. No outside jury influence nor coercion is accepted. The members of the jury must come to a final decision independently. Without outside assistance, feedback, support, etc. Hearings and sessions continues until juries reach minimum consensus threshold. Judges will be randomly allocated to fill positions throughout and across jurisdictions of the system of courts. All judge positions rotate every year. Each elected judge randomly rotates positions 3 times each term. A judge can only hold the same position once in the same term. Superintendents are the elected officials of their constituency police force. Superintendents enforce juries' decisions and lead their constituency police force. Veto freedom supply. Transparency and full visibility freedom supply. Defense and self-defense freedom supply. Legal system offenses. Citizenry never loses freedom, liberties and rights in case of charge with offenses. Instead, in cases of serious offenses, offending citizens, permanent residents, and visa holders have limited freedoms during the length of the sentence based on the offense or offenses charged by juries after all appealing options have been accounted for. Citizenry never loses their voting freedoms under any circumstances. However, serious offenders can stand for office at any government level during the sentence period, including a stand-down period of 10 years after completion of sentence, including pardons, etc. Recurrent offenders need to wait for 10 years after the completion of last offense in order to have full standing for office freedoms. Non-serious offenders, excluding minor offenders, can stand for office during the sentence period, including a stand-down period of 3 years after completion of sentence. Minor offenders can stand for office during the sentence period. Any sentenced offender under imprisonment during any election cycle has the freedom to choose which electorates they vote for based on any residential address they have lived in for at least 90 consecutive days in the last 10 years before imprisonment. More pending. Electoral constituencies enrollment. Citizenry enrollment in electoral constituencies at any of the 3 levels of government. Citizenry constituency candidates enroll for electoral constituency based on any residential addresses they have lived in for at least 90 consecutive days in the last 3 years. Citizens abroad and outside Earth orbit electoral constituency enrollment. Citizenry enroll for electoral constituencies based on any residential addresses they lived in for at least 90 consecutive days in the last 10 years before their latest departure. Voting age, adulthood age, standing for office age, 18. Age of consent, between 16 and 18. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. Driving, air, and sea transportation age, 16. Driving, air, and sea motorbikes, jet skis, drones, etc. age, 16. Driving terrestrial and land transportation age, 15. Driving territorial and land motorbikes, jet skis, drones, etc. age, 15. Driving all Earth and outside Earth's orbit transportation age, 17. Private property, physical, non-physical property freedom supply. Private and public government debt. All legacy, public government debt incurred prior to the founding of the Republic is hereby, here and now, declared forgiven by all creditors and claimants forever, infinitely. All private debt owned by the citizenry all private debt owned by the citizenry is hereby, here and now, declared forgiven by all creditors and claimants forever, infinitely. I'll repeat that again. All private debt owed by our citizenry, is hereby, here and now, declared forgiven by all creditors and claimants forever, infinitely. I'll repeat that one more time. All private debt owed by our citizenry, he is hereby, here and now, declared forgiven by all creditors and claimants forever, infinitely. Our citizenry and our republic are immune to any debt claims put forward by any or anything forever, infinitely. Non-citizens who have freedoms, liberties, and rights within our republic renegotiate all their debts within our republic. Thus, all their former debts are hereby, here and now, forgiven forever, infinitely. Financial freedoms and issue of currency freedoms apply. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. Legislative, executive branches, central government, elections every 3 years, seat one citizenry constituency candidate for every 20,000 citizenry constituents. A limit of 3 terms applies to all citizenry constituency candidates, whether consecutive or non-consecutive terms periods. Judicial branch, including police force, broken down by constituency. Elections every 3 years. Seat equals 2 citizenry constituency candidates, 1 judge and 1 superintendent for every 10,000 citizenry constituents. A limit of 3 terms applies to all citizenry constituency candidates, whether consecutive or non-consecutive term periods. Local government. Elections every 3 years. Local seat equals 1 citizenry constituency candidate for every 5,000 citizenry constituents. A limit of 3 terms apply to all citizenry constituency candidates, whether consecutive or non-consecutive terms period. Electoral cycle calendar. First year, local government. Second year, judicial branch, all judges including police force. Third year, legislative, executive branches, central government. 3 levels of electorates based on citizenry constituency ratios equals 3 levels. 3 electoral levels of governance. Local government, 1 constituency member, electoral member for every 5,000 people. Judicial branch, 2, 1 judge, 1 superintendent for every 10,000 people. Central government, 1 candidate for every 20,000 people. Citizenry veto powers and public hearings. The citizenry of our republic are heads of state and commanders-in-chief at once and simultaneously. No committee, entity, or agency from state or government, foreign or domestic, can bypass, impede, thwart, hinder, block, etc., and so on any hearing, investigation, nor citizenry veto powers from taking place. Any individual citizen can present evidence, reasons, with a group of at least 10 other citizens, can be family members, to any committee, power, and/or authority within their constituency and exercise citizenry veto freedoms. As a result, a public hearing immediately starts and a discovery process commences to gather all evidence, facts, reasons, etc., and so on, as to why the veto is being exercised. Veto powers freedoms apply. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. Local, judicial, and central government, committees. Elected officials cannot be members of 2 or more committees simultaneously. A limit of 1 committee per term, no exceptions. Joining the Republic. Preamble. Because of our free will, the citizenry is hereby, here and now, granted the freedoms, independence, and sovereignty to all peoples and states. Any free, independent, and sovereign peoples, state, etc., and so on, from earth, of, or outside Earth's orbit can formally request to join the Republic, to join the citizenry of the Republic. Once the process is completed, their former states cease to exist, and such lands and territories form part of our Republic. The citizenry of such former states are granted all our freedoms, liberties, and rights, including authorities and powers over the government and state of the Republic. Essentially, they are equal in status to all other members of the citizenry of the Republic. Thus, they are citizens. All constitutional frameworks apply. The new lands and territories are part of the jurisdictions of the citizenry of the Republic, meaning the citizenry of the Republic owns all new lands and territories. Political parties and central banks of the former states are hereby, here and now, obsolete. Citizenry, constituency candidates, and constituencies rules apply for legislative, executive, judicial, and local government elections. Central government seat equals 1 citizenry constituency candidate for every 20,000 citizenry constituents. Judicial seat, 2 citizenry constituency candidates, 1 judge, 1 superintendent, 10,000 people. Local government seat, 1 citizenry constituency candidate for every 5,000 citizenry constituents. The heritage and legacy of all new lands and territories are preserved and honored as part of joining our Republic. Oath of allegiance. Our nation is constituted by the free will of our citizens. Our nation and all of our citizens are free, sovereign, and independent. All of our nation's powers and authorities rest in us, its citizens. Each citizen of our nation is self-sovereign. We stand free, united, and equal as one nation on Earth and outside Earth's orbit. We live in a free, sovereign, and independent republic. We, the citizens, are the powers and authorities of our republic on Earth and outside Earth's orbit forever, infinitely. The citizens of the republic declare Earth and outside Earth's orbit neutrality towards all states and peoples. All powers and authorities rest in the hands of our citizens at once, simultaneously, forever, infinitely. The citizens of the Republic are at once, simultaneously, heads of state and commanders-in-chief, forever, infinitely. The citizens of the Republic own the state and the government of the Republic, forever, infinitely. The citizens of our Republic come together to form a democratically elected government that exercises administrative functions of the state, representing our nation's domestic and foreign affairs and interests. The purpose of our elected government and its officials is to safeguard, uphold, protect, defend, strengthen, and promote the freedoms, liberties, and rights of all citizens, of all the citizens of our nation, permanent residents, and certain eligible visa holders. No state, government, individual, groups, institution, and/or entity, foreign or domestic, have any rights, powers, and/or authorities over any of our citizens, nation, state, and/or government. Our freedoms, liberties, and rights, not an exclusive list. Free will. True self-freedoms. Our freedoms to forge our own paths, make our own decisions, take action, choose our own identities, purposes, destinations in all matters of existence, forever, infinitely. Infinite freedoms. Our freedoms are infinite, limitless, and without boundaries. We understand that new forms of freedoms emerge. We claim them all freedoms forever, infinitely. Energy freedoms. Our citizens have infinite energy sovereignty and independence. 0 point and over unity systems, propulsion, gravity mastery, and all new technologies belong to the citizenry, including patents, the like, and all freedoms to current and future discoveries. Time freedoms. Identity freedoms. Purpose freedoms. Action freedoms. True freedoms. Speech freedoms. Our minds and words are spoken freely, forever, infinitely. Those are speech freedoms. Press freedoms. Our mediums, media, and the like are free forever, infinitely. Expression freedoms. Our lives and actions are expressed freely, forever, infinitely. Movement freedoms. Our destinations are ours forever, infinitely. Assembly freedoms. Our union is eternal, forever, infinitely. Worship freedoms. Our beliefs, values, principles, faith, etc., and so on are sacred, forever, infinitely. Political freedoms. We're free to stand for office and elect others to office. Infinite veto freedoms, petitions, etc., forever, infinitely. Economic freedoms. We're prosperous, abundant, and free from debt, forever, infinitely. Defense and self-defense freedoms. We defend ourselves from those wishing us harm, forever, infinitely. Legal freedoms. We honor due process of law, forever, infinitely. Human freedoms. Education freedoms. Housing and accommodation freedoms. Technological freedoms. Full health freedoms. Cultural freedoms. Environmental and natural resources freedoms. Trade freedoms. Institutional freedoms. Heritage and legacy freedoms. Intellectual property freedoms. Quality assurance freedoms. Food freedoms. Medical freedoms. Full body freedoms. Physical, non-physical property freedoms. Transparency and privacy freedoms. The issue of currency freedoms. Our citizenry can issue currency to cover all standard cost of living required to guarantee all of our freedoms, with the proviso that they act within reason, apply common sense, and adhere to non-inflationary best practices to warrant financial freedoms forever, infinitely. Financial freedoms. Land and territorial freedoms. Our citizenry owns all the lands, territories, and uncharted, unclaimed discoveries of, by, for the Republic, that is to say, freehold, forever, infinitely. Private property freedoms. Electoral freedoms. Veto power freedoms. Voting freedoms. Standing for office freedoms. Destination freedoms. Action freedoms. Flow freedoms. The true north freedoms. Compass freedoms. Fantasies and illusions freedoms. Why-how freedoms. Here and now freedoms. Local government. Preamble. The purpose of local government is to guarantee the proper functioning of the administrative state at a local level. The local government jurisdictions are based on electorates. Each electorate seat is presided by an elected citizenry constituency candidate who represents a citizenry constituency of no more than 50,000 people or citizens. Within this jurisdiction, the local government's purpose is to warrant and guarantee all public services to function at the highest standard of excellence possible. Such public services include infrastructure, buildings, funds, grids, etc., and so on. The Heritage and Legacy Office bestows on elected citizenry constituency candidates for each citizenry constituency for the period of their term, no longer than 3 consecutive years, the duty of care of all public services within the jurisdiction of their citizenry constituency. The local government is owned by the citizenry of the Republic. Earth and outside Earth orbit. Preamble. Earth and outside Earth orbit implies foreign affairs and interests of the citizenry of the Republic. Note, for example, no one can act unilaterally on our behalf, regardless of position, status, etc., and so on and the like. Committees. Committee decisions only stand with a supermajority vote of 90%. Defense and self-defense freedoms apply. Veto freedoms apply. So as you can see, fellow humans, all of us here on Earth, the citizenry, this is Earth's Constitution's draft. This is the first document ever written in history in which we all humans have full freedoms, infinite freedoms, in which we can manifest our free will and have free lives for the rest of our existence. Because Earth is our republic, and we came here for that very purpose, to found the republic, to live free lives. So this is my draft, which I'm sharing with you, with the world, with all the citizenry, all of us, Earth's population. We all free, independent, and sovereign. So I'm putting this out there for you to read, understand. I'm adding links to my website. and Substack, so you can actually go and read the text, the draft. You can also contribute and enhance it, make it better. I love you all. I love humanity. We're all one. We're infinite energy, everybody. We are. I love you.